Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I've got to manage three things here, I'm afraid. My script, the clicker, and the microphone. I am Peter Reynolds. I'm the president of CLEAR Cannabis Law Reform. I think I'm only the second person from the reform community here to speak today. We were founded in 1999. We have approximately 750,000 followers on social media, and we're now approaching a total of 5,000 paid-up members. That makes us the longest established cannabis group in the UK, and our follower and membership base is several times that of all other drug policy groups combined. Last year, last year we launched Cannabis Professionals, or Cannapro, the trade association for the UK's cannabis, CBD and hemp businesses. Now I'm going to explain to you why, what we think we can contribute to the industry, and how we're going to do it. But before I do that, I'm going to go right off script because I have some breaking news. The breaking news from Downing Street is a confirmation that in fact the person behind the recent initiative to place cannabis extracts in the novel foods catalogue was none other than Theresa May's #1 fixer, Chris Grayling. I think, that's not true, that's fake news, but there's a kernel of truth in it. And the truth in it is that this move by the Food Standards Agency in this country and its opposite number in various other countries is based on nonsense. It's incompetent. And just as Chris Grayling has got people calling for his blood, I suspect that's exactly what's going to be happening shortly to the people in the food police. So these are CLEAR's objectives. Overall, to end the prohibition of cannabis. Secondly, to promote as a matter of urgency and compassion the prescription of medicinal cannabis by doctors. And of course, that has been achieved. And I think many people still don't appreciate to what extent that's been achieved, because the law is now completely out of the equation. The law is no longer a problem. And although there's many things to complain about as to where we are, and the lack of availability is terrible, it is nothing to do with the law. Because in fact what has happened is the government has passed the buck. The government has passed the buck to the medical profession, and it's passed the buck back into the endless ministry of circumlocution known as the Home Office. Because there are two main issues here. The first issue is, will doctors prescribe it? And we have to remember that doctors have been subject to the same propaganda as the whole of society for the last 60, 70 years. And they're just as susceptible to that as everybody else. In fact, doctors have been threatened, intimidated, told they mustn't have anything to do with cannabis. So since I've been leading CLEAR, we've had a number of doctors approach us, going back 5, 6, 7 years now, who said, I have a patient, I know he or she uses cannabis, I know it works very effectively for them, is there any chance of me getting a license? And we've worked with them to go to the Home Office and discuss the possibility of this, got their doctors involved, in some instances even got their MPs involved. And what's happened as a result of this is these doctors have received private phone calls from Home Office officials warning them off and telling them if they look into this any deeper, it will go against their careers. So that's the reality of what's been going on in this country. But anyway, the law is out of the way now, and what we have to do is deal with these two issues. First of all, educating doctors, but secondly, and in some ways just as big an issue, is the availability of the product. Because the Home Office has taken absolutely no steps whatsoever to facilitate production of these new products. They're known as cannabis-based products for medicinal use, CBPMs, and you'd think with the change in the law that the Home Office would be interested in receiving applications to produce these products. They're not. And although many people talk about the fact that they're growing, so now some large publicly quoted companies talk about the fact that they're growing, I can tell you for a fact that they're not. How can I tell you that for a fact? Because recently we've had an FOI request back, which I'll be publishing the results of shortly, and also just last week there was a question, a written parliamentary question in the House of Lords, not the House of Commons, House of Lords, which of course has been buried away, where the Home Office confirmed that it's not issued any medical cannabis licenses. In fact, that it has never issued a medical cannabis license. All it has issued is licenses for the extraction of cannabinoids. So that is the second, and in some ways the more difficult problem, that we have to get the Home Office to actually facilitate the production of these products, because until doctors have something to prescribe, it's impossible. So our third objective is a long way of saying legalization, to introduce a system of regulation for the production and supply of cannabis based on facts and evidence. And of course, that's the one important point I want to make about this, is that legalization doesn't mean a free-for-all. You know, even when cannabis is legalized, there is still going to be a great deal of rules and regulations, and those rules and regulations are going to need enforcing. And really, in fact, what's going on in the CBD industry is a microcosm of what's going to happen when all of cannabis is legalized. Our fourth objective has been to encourage the production and use of industrial hemp, and the fifth is to educate and inform. So we've had a legal cannabis industry for thousands of years. There was just a brief interlude between 1964 and 1993 when even the cultivation of industrial hemp was banned. So although there have been severe restrictions on cannabis since 1928, since the first Dangerous Drugs Act, it was actually only those 29 years between 64 and 93 when there was no form of legal industry at all. Now the CBD business, as we know it, really started in 2012. And at CLEAR, we understood what that was about straight away, but because by then, largely due to the rapid uptake of the internet, knowledge about the medicinal benefits of cannabis was exploding. And the reason it was doing so was because people wanted to enjoy the medicinal benefits of cannabis legally, without breaking the law. And the leap came, first of all, with the story of Charlotte Figi, when the almost miraculous effect of CBD on epilepsy became widely understood. And then it was really in 2013 or 14 in the UK when CBD websites started to appear in numbers. And back in those early days, the leading brands were from America. There was Plus CBD and, of course, Charlotte's Web. And in Europe, really, the only major player was Indica. And well, now look at where we are. I mean, this is remarkable. I mean, this is the realization of a market which nobody has really quantified. I mean, again, you'll hear lots of different numbers, but nobody really knows what it's worth. But I mean, I've been immense. I mean, this is a small hall. Let's be fair, it's a small hall, but it's packed. And I mean, I've been amazed. You know, I've been around this market for 7, 8 years now, as long as it's been, and I haven't heard of 3/4 of the people here. So it's quite remarkable. And so, I mean, as I say, what I think is that the CBD market has really had a major influence on the reforms that happened last year, and it's all about destigmatizing cannabis because people have begun to realize that it does have truly therapeutic benefits. And of course, that's really the big issue, isn't it? Because, you know, we're not allowed to make claims of medicinal benefit. I see people on this stage today saying they're not allowed to make claims of medicinal benefit and then going on and doing exactly that. But I mean, the fact is that we are not allowed to make claims for medicinal benefit, but that is the reason people buy the product. I don't know any other reason people buy CBD. So the CBD industry itself, we had an intervention from the MHRA in 2016, which in retrospect I regard as having been justified, because it was all about medicinal claims. And unless you believe that we should have a free-for-all and people should be able to sell bottles of coloured water as a cancer cure, then we do have to have medicines regulation. And it's one of the few functions, I mean, I'm a great believer in small government, but it's one of the few functions that is exactly right for governments. You know, government must have medicines regulations. If we're going to make claims about a medical product, then it has to be capable of being verified. But now we have opposition from the medical establishment, opposition from the big business establishment, and of course there's the talk of the threats to the pharmaceutical industry. Now, I've never been a believer in the big pharma conspiracy theory that the pharmaceutical industry is the sole reason that cannabis is still prohibited. Because I know to my personal knowledge that many pharmaceutical companies are researching cannabinoids. And if they could come up with a product or a medicine that delivers the therapeutic benefits that some of our more evangelical advocates claim, then they'd be right on it and they'd be making a fortune. So, you know, in many ways, the pharmaceutical industry is a partner in this like the rest of us. But I do think that what's happening recently is more simply about large organizations seeing that this is a very exciting opportunity and seeing that if they can get in and see it regulated so strictly or regulated to such a great extent that it will only be large corporations that are able to make any money out of it. So I think the intervention from the FSA, again, as I say, apparently it's an intervention not just from the UK FSA, but I understand from the responsible for the Netherlands and Germany as well. And I wonder why. I wonder why. Just as we, in particular, are about to free ourselves of the shackles of the EU whilst this has been made. Well, what I can tell you is that Tom Westham of Cannabidol was very good enough to share his white paper with me last week, looking at what he considers to be the latest legal position. And we have taken legal advice from a top QC, Daniel Stillitz. And it's quite clear where we stand. And the head of novel foods at the FSA will have a letter on his desk on Monday morning from Cannabis Professionals telling him that if any enforcement action is taken, then we will be seeking compensation under Protocol 1 of Article 1 of the Human Rights Act. And we were advised by a QC who specialises in this area that simply in the UK alone, that could be a claim in 8 figures. And if the whole industry, if this was to happen, which I don't believe it will, but if the whole industry was to get together, this would be a claim in 9 or 10 figures. So we're talking about hundreds of millions of pounds. There's no way this is going to happen. As Tom eloquently says in his white paper, something can't suddenly become novel that wasn't novel before. So the whole thing is a nonsense. I think something that's very instructive is that in my last meeting with the FSA, and I've met them several times over the last couple of years, I confirmed with them, they acknowledged and confirmed that the purpose of novel foods legislation is to ensure safety in food and food ingredients. And in literally the next sentence, they confirmed that they have no evidence that cannabis extracts are unsafe. So this is simply bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake. It's nothing else. And as I said, I think there's something that concerns. I mean, I'm a Brexiteer. I don't mind, you know, that may be a dirty word to some of you, but I don't mind admitting it. I'm proud of it, in fact. And I think that this sort of bureaucracy and this sort of interference, over-regulation, is one of the reasons why I voted leave, and I think why many people voted leave. And the last thing we want is, you know, to stay stuck in the house. I'm a Europhile. I think Europe's wonderful, but I'm a EU phobe. And this is really the big question, if you ask me. If these bureaucrats have so much time on their hands, why don't they start looking at where regulation is really needed? You know, the harms and the damage in our society, not just by the absence of access, but the harms and the damage that are caused by the £6 billion criminal market are outrageous. That's where bureaucrats should be putting their interest. So why cannabis professionals? Why have we got involved in this area? Well, when the MHRA originally intervened in 2016, we approached some of the leading people in the market, in particular Love Hemp, who were certainly the market leaders at that time, and if they're not still now, are certainly right up there. And some of our other colleagues and friends. And we managed to arrange a meeting with the MHRA. It wasn't an easy thing to do. Their first tactic in the first place was to try and ignore us. Again, that's the way that bureaucrats work. But in the end, I was able to get Crispin Bluntz, the Conservative MP, and Professor Mike Barnes, who were members of the CLEAR board, to write to the Chief Executive of the MHRA, and eventually they agreed to meet. We put to them the proposal that in order for CBD to continue to be sold as a food supplement, it should be on the basis of having a maximum daily dose of 200 milligrams. And although they haven't confirmed that, and they still haven't confirmed it to this day, in practice they've accepted it. And this was the creation of the Cannabis Trades Association. And I've worked together intensively as part of the Cannabis Trades Association for 2 years. Unfortunately, for reasons that I'm not going to go into here, you can find out the reasons very easily by looking at my personal websites. I found it necessary to resign from the CTA, and so did Love Hemp. There was issues connected with the ethical standards in the management of the organisation. And so we set up Cannapro with a view to support and nurture the industry without exploiting it in any way. We don't charge any membership fees. The only time we ever ask anybody for any money is if they want to become Cannapro certified. And what that means is that we go through a process of examining their products, looking at the way they market them, looking at their website, and offering any advice or guidance they need to become legally compliant. But we don't require them to pay us a monthly membership fee to do that. All our advice and guidance is published openly. We're inclusive, we're not exclusive. And we're in the process of developing a cooperative advertising campaign. I come from the advertising industry. Together with one of the major media agencies, we are working on finding a way for companies that are Cannapro certified to get into mainstream advertising. As we all know, social media doesn't work for us. We need to find a way of reaching our target audience in a different way. And so what this will mean is that people will make a small contribution, and a number of small contributions will add up to a big general campaign. Something like this. This is what we already do on social media. If you're buying CBD, beware of scams, fake product and poor quality. Choose someone who you can see the Cannapro logo. So all I would say to you is all our information is available freely. Follow Cannapro for all the latest news, or follow Cannapro for all the latest information on the legal situation. We've already purchased or paid for the legal advice which we're giving to you. We don't need any more money for it. If we do, we'll ask for it, but it's not necessary. These problems these problems are something that lawyers will be very happy to take a great deal of money off you for, but they're not that complicated. It's all easy enough if you understand how to read an Act of Parliament. And the other crucial issue, I think, and this is a crucial point about balance, is that we represent the industry to the authorities. We are standing up to the FSA. Again, all our correspondence with the FSA is published openly. You can see it on our Facebook group. You can see it on our website. And we've told them exactly where we think they need to get off. And that's what we're going to continue to do. And we represent you to them. We're not on their side. We're not too close to them. We're close to the people in the business. So that means that we take a balanced and sensible approach to compliance. Now, for instance, hemp tea. It is a fact under the law that hemp tea, if it's made from leaf and flower, is a Class B drug. And any of you selling hemp tea, in theory, could go to jail for 14 years, because that's what you're doing. There's no getting away from that. That is the fact of the law. But that is something that has not been enforced for many, many years, and is not going to be enforced. And we will certify people under the Cannapro name if they sell hemp tea. However, we will not certify people who sell whatever euphemism you want to give to them: CBD flowers, hemp flowers, CBD buds, or in other words, cannabis. These things are incapable of being what is an exempt product in the same way as CBD oil is. I think many people still don't understand why you can sell CBD oil, because a correct term for CBD oil is really low THC cannabis extract. So why can you sell that, but you can't sell other forms of cannabis? It's because of the level of THC in it. And the other common misconception, of course, is 0.2%. 0.2% has nothing to do with it. The only relevance of 0.2% is if you're applying for a license to cultivate. The limit in terms of selling an oil or selling any other product is there cannot be more than 1 milligram of THC or 1 milligram of CBN in any single container. And this is why, and this may seem like a fine legal point, but this is why CBD buds or hemp flowers can never be legal, because cannabis itself is a controlled drug. So there is always going to be more than 1 milligram of a controlled drug in a hemp flower. And in the longer term, I mean, I make my living from advising companies on getting into the legal cannabis market. And we are already looking at future developments of cannabis-based products for medicinal use. I believe the Home Office will eventually break down, and we will eventually, I mean, there's pressure coming from members of Parliament now. You know, I'm working with large organisations that have got their MP on side, their MPs are lobbying behind the scenes, and the Home Office is going to have to change its way. So we're looking at developing cannabis-based products for medicinal use, also THR licensed products, that is products licensed by the MHRA under what's called traditional herbal registration. These can only be for minor ailments, but I think these are going to be a very important part, quite a quickly arriving part of the CBD industry, and VMD licensed products, that's veterinary products. Because again, I don't know how many of you are fully up to speed with this, it is a criminal offence to supply products for pets. In fact, I'll go even further than that, it is now a criminal defence to give CBD products to a pet. Right, if you give CBD oil to your dog, you're committing a crime. I do it every day, and I shall continue to do it. So my long-term objective really is to close down CLEAR. That's why we support this industry. That's why we've launched Cannapro, because I see very much the CBD industry, the legal cannabis industry, as the driver of further cannabis law reform. When we can show that we can act responsibly and sensibly in products that are legal, only then is society, is the community going to trust us to act responsibly and legally with THC. So that'll be the end, when adults have legal access to cannabis for all purposes, including the right to grow it for themselves. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've got time for a couple of questions. Would anybody like to ask Peter a question?
Thank you, Peter. Peter, do you think there'll be a time anytime soon where it can be grown in the UK to make oil from it in the UK? Because I think on that last point about, you said it'll never be the case. When can we be self-sufficient in the UK, do you think?
Oh, we could be self-sufficient in the UK within 12 months. All that has to happen is the Home Office to issue a licence. I mean, I've worked with a number of Canadian licensed producers who have what is effectively a flat pack model of production. And they can come in on a greenfield site, put up a grow facility, and be producing products within 12 months. And all that needs to happen is in terms of producing what we call CBD oil from industrial hemp, I mean, there's no real basis upon which the Home Office denies licenses on that. If somebody here has got the money to fund a judicial review, in my unqualified legal opinion, you will win. You know, if it is manifestly unreasonable, irrational and unjust that you're not allowed to extract oil from industrial hemp. You just need to have the money to fight the Home Office. Well, because the cost of a judicial review like that is going to be £50,000 upwards.
You mentioned people having the right to grow it for themselves. How long do you think it might
I can't hear a word you're saying, sir.
You mentioned the people having the right to grow for themselves, for whatever purpose. How long do you think it might be until people have that right?
Well, I'm only guessing with that answer. I mean, we have now, CLEAR that is, has now changed its policy on home cultivation. We used to be very firm about the fact that it was important that we shouldn't advocate what was effectively breaking the law. I do not believe anymore that there is a sustainable case for prosecuting anybody who's growing for themselves who can demonstrate a medical condition. Because with the change in the law, the medical necessity defence that was ruled out in 2005 must surely now be on the table again. So we now advocate firmly, and I'll tell you this, I do it myself. I have an 80 centimetre square tent. I grow one auto-flowering plant, and every 3 months it produces between 4 to 6 ounces of weed. I'm perfectly self-sufficient. It doesn't even go off my property. Nobody else is involved. I'm not involved in any criminal market. And if we're all doing that, then what? So we now advocate that, and we say if you have a medical condition, there's no way you can be prosecuted for that. And if you are prosecuted, you know, it's a case that can go to the Supreme Court and can be won.
Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have any more time for any questions, unfortunately, but Peter has a stand in Compliance Corner, which is just behind us here, so please catch up with him later. Can you put your hands together, please, for Mr. Peter Reynolds? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very good.